Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better.
Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, Teilhard de Chardin, part 27, in which I will pick up right where Gwydion left off in part 26. If you would like to start at the beginning with Teilhard de Chardin part 1, or anywhere in between 1 and 26, you can click right there. If you're in the future, then that'll include 27 and 28 as well, even though I'm just now starting to, you know how timing works. So, hey, Editor Edward.
Yes?
Hey, Editor Edward, why is it that you're sitting in front of the bookshelf dressed like that instead of where we usually see you sitting at the desk, you know, editing? I just was feeling lazy, and I'm not planning to say anything when I'm actually editing that I don't already know what it's going to be. All right, that sounds fair. Let's just say I'm Editor Edward, who sits in front of the bookshelf, and there's another higher level of Editor Edward. Why did Paul McCartney come on? I was thinking that since today, as you can see, is a blue and purple episode, among the 15 episodes where we're focusing on the color scheme, I thought that it would be nice to have, you know, like how sometimes we do the saints of the day if there's like 2 of them. Right, so who are the saints for October 28th, 2024? Well, there's Saint Jude, who you just heard. I mean, that was Paul McCartney, of course, singing to Julian Lennon. But anyway, it was a different time. All right. So he was calling him Jude and so on. But in this context, we're talking about Judas, not Judas Iscariot, not the famous one, the other Judas. They call him Jude for a reason, you know, to distinguish Mike from Michael. By the way, there was an episode in which our dad, our mutual dad, Gwydion and Edward and Fred BT, yeah, we all have the same dad because we're all the same person. But anyway, so he wrote a story in the early 60s from the perspective of Thomas that focuses on the other Judas Iscariot. You can listen to me recite that back in 2007 there, with a terrible echo on there, unfortunately. I'll re-recite it at some point. Oh, thanks, Gwydion. Yeah, that's fun. All right, but yeah, he was, they say he was Jesus's brother, and he's the saint you pray to when it's a lost cause. And is there a second one? There's also Saint Simon. So he was also said to be brother of Jesus. Does he get a song too? They can't all be winners, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, that's who we got. Cool. And so which one are you going to make blue and which one are you going to make purple? Blue, purple. Okay, and if you don't mind, could you, I don't know, make things a little more blue and purple? And we'll get rid of this. Okay, we're done with the silliness. We can get to the reading as soon as I get my magnifying glass. And light the incense, which of course is frankincense and myrrh. How are you doing? You doing well? So Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit Catholic priest, and he was writing in the 40s and 50s. He was French. He lived for a time in Africa, and he lived for a time in China. Anyway, we're picking up right where we left off, which is toward the end of the Divine Milieu. Epilogue. Wow, we really are at the end of the Divine Milieu. In expectation of the Perusia. Top level Editor Edward, could you remind us the meaning of Perusia? Perusia, in Christian theology, is another term for the second coming, but it literally means being present. Thank you, real editor. Don't tell the other one I said that. Segregation and aggregation. separation of the evil elements of the world, and, quote, coadunation. Editor. Coadunation is a noun that means the union of dissimilar substances into one body or mass. In biology, it can also refer to the process of similar parts or organs being closely joined or united together by growth. Thank you, Editor Edward. And quote, of the elemental worlds that each faithful spirit constructs around him in work and pain. Under the influence of this twofold movement, which is still almost entirely hidden, the universe is being transformed and is maturing all around us. We are sometimes inclined to think that the same things are monotonously repeated over and over again in the history of creation. That is because the season is too long by comparison with the brevity of our individual lives, and the transformation too vast and too inward by comparison with our superficial and restricted outlook, for us to see the progress of what is tirelessly taking place in and through all matter and all spirit. Let us believe in revelation, once again our faithful support in our most human forebodings, under the commonplace envelope of things, and of all our purified and salvaged efforts, a new earth is being slowly engendered. One day, the gospel tells us, the tension gradually accumulating between humanity and God will touch the limits prescribed by the possibilities of the world, and then will come the end. Then the presence of Christ, which has been silently accruing in things, will suddenly be revealed like a flash of light from pole to pole. Breaking through all the barriers within, which the veil of matter and the watertightness of souls have seemingly kept it confined, it will invade the face of the earth, and under the finally liberated action of the true affinities of being, the spiritual atoms of the world will be borne along by a force generated by the powers of cohesion proper to the universe itself, and will occupy, whether within Christ or without Christ, parentheses, but always under the influence of Christ, end parentheses, the place of happiness or pain designated for them by the living structure of the pleroma. From the old Greek word pleres, I don't know if I'm pronouncing these things correctly, meaning full. Pleron means to make full, and pleroma means that which fills. Then, in the late 17th century, it was adopted via Latin in Christian theology, and came to mean the totality or fullness of the Godhead, which dwells in Christ. Now, also mentioned here is the meaning, the definition in Gnosticism. Put a pin in that for later in this episode. That's going to just remember the word Gnosticism. If it's the first time you've heard it, write it down phonetically if you want. It starts with a G. Anyway, the spiritual universe as the abode of God and the totality of the divine powers and emanations. Sicut fulgur exit ab oriente et paret usque ad occidentem sicut venit diluvium et tulit omnes ita erit adventus filii Homines, Editor Edward. The Gospel according to Matthew in the New Testament of the Bible, one of the 4 canonized Gospels. Put a pin in that for later. Anyway, it's in Latin, sicut enim fulgor exit ab oriente et peret usque in occidente ita erit et adventus filii hominis. And if you were paying very close attention, you might already notice that Teilhard quoted the first 3/4 of that. Then there were 3 dots. Then there was something else from somewhere else. Then there were 3 dots. Then there was the final quarter of that quote. The quote is, or it means, "For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." Now, the part that was shoved in there in the middle comes from 12 verses later in the same chapter 24 of Matthew. Et non cognoverunt donec venit diluvium et tilut omnes ita erit et adventus filii hominis. Meaning, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So the way Teilhard de Chardin wrote it, basically, is, "For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, and they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away, so will be the coming of man." So he conjoins these separate verses into one statement. Thank you, Editor Edward. Like lightning, like a conflagration, like a flood, the attraction exerted by the Son of Man will lay hold of all the whirling elements in the universe so as to reunite them or subject them to his body. Ubi cumque fuerit corpus congregabuntur et aquile. Editor Edward. So this is the verse that comes immediately after the 27th verse in the same chapter. It's from Matthew 24:28. "For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together." Let's put that to a song in the style of John Michael Talbot. "For wherever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together." Sorry. Thank you, Editor Edward. Such will be the consummation of the divine milieu. Sorry, I had to take a sip of my nothing. Because he said divine milieu for the first time. Usually we're drunk by now. Anyway, where was I? As the gospel warns us, it would be vain to speculate as to the hour and the modalities of this formidable event, but we have to expect it. Expectation, anxious, collective, and operative expectation of an end of the world. Trigger warning for people who were made to go to church as a child. That is to say, of an issue for the world. That is perhaps the supreme Christian function and the most distinctive characteristic of our religion. Trigger warning. Did I already say that? Historically speaking, that expectation has never ceased to guide the progress of our faith like a torch. The Israelites were constantly expectant, and the first Christians too. Christmas, which might have been thought to turn our gaze towards the past, has only fixed it further in the future. The Messiah, who appeared for a moment in our midst, only allowed himself to be seen and touched for a moment before vanishing once again, more luminous and ineffable than ever, into the depths of the future. He came. Yet now we must expect him, no longer a small chosen group among us, but all men, once again and more than ever. The Lord Jesus will only come soon if we ardently expect him. It is an accumulation of desires that should cause the pleroma to burst upon us. Successors to Israel, we Christians have been charged with keeping the flame of desire ever alive in the world. Only 20 centuries have passed since the Ascension. What have we made of our expectancy? A rather childish haste, combined with the error in perspective which led the first generation of Christians to believe in the immediate return of Christ, has unfortunately left us delusioned and suspicious. Our faith in the kingdom of God has been disconcerted by the resistance of the world to good. A certain pessimism, perhaps encouraged by an exaggerated conception of the original fall, has led us to regard the world as decidedly and incorrigibly wicked. And so we have allowed the flame to die down in our sleeping hearts. No doubt, we see with greater or less distress the approach of individual death. No doubt, again, our prayers and actions are conscientiously directed to bring about the, quote, the coming of God's kingdom, end quote. But in fact, how many of us are genuinely motivated in the depths of our hearts by the wild hope that our earth will be recast? Who is there who sets a course in the midst of our darkness toward the first glimmer of a real dawn? Where is the Christian in whom the impatient longing for Christ succeeds, not in submerging, parentheses, as it should, end parentheses, the cares of human love and human interests, but even in counterbalancing them? Where is the Catholic, as passionately vowed, parentheses, by conviction and not by convention, end parentheses, to spreading the hopes of the Incarnation, as are many humanitarians to spreading the dream of the new city? We persist in saying that we keep vigil in expectation of the Master, but in reality we should have to admit, if we were sincere, that we no longer expect anything. The flame must be revived at all costs. At all costs, we must renew in ourselves the desire and the hope for the great coming, with a capital C and an O. But where are we to look for the source of this rejuvenation? We shall clearly find it, first and foremost, in an increase of the attraction exercised directly by Christ upon his members, and then in an increase of interest discovered by our thought in the preparation and consummation of the parousia. And from where is the interest itself to spring? From the perception of a more intimate connection between the victory of Christ and the outcome of the work which our human effort here below is seeking to construct. We are constantly forgetting that the supernatural is a ferment, a soul, and not a complete and finished organism. Its role is to transform, quote, nature, end quote, semicolon, but it cannot do so apart from the matter which nature provides it. If the Jewish people have, remained turned towards the Messiah for 3,000 years, it is because he appeared to them to enshrine the glory of their people. If the disciples of St. Paul lived in perpetual expectation of the great day, that was because it was to the Son of Man that they looked for a personal and tangible solution to the problems and the injustices of life. The expectation of heaven cannot remain alive unless it is incarnate. What body shall we give to ours today? That of a huge and totally human hope. Let us look at the earth around us. What is happening under our eyes within the mass of peoples? What is the cause of this disorder in society, this uneasy agitation, these swelling waves, these whirling and mingling currents, and these turbulent and formidable new impulses? Mankind is visibly passing through a crisis of growth. Mankind is becoming dimly aware of its shortcomings and its capacities, and as we said on the first page, it sees the universe growing luminous like the horizon just before sunrise. It has a sense of premonition and of expectation. Subject, like everyone else, to that attraction, the Christian, we said, sometimes wonders, and it is so uneasy, and it is uneasy. May he not be bestowing his adoration on an idol. Our study, now completed, of the divine milieu suggests an answer to this fear. Those of us who are disciples of Christ must not hesitate to harness this force which needs us and which we need. On the contrary, under the pain of allowing it to be lost and of perishing ourselves, we should share those aspirations, in essence religious. Aspirations, in essence religious, which make the men of today feel so strongly the immensity of the world, the greatness of the mind, and the sacred value of every new truth. It is in this way that our Christian generation will learn again to expect. We have gone deeply into these new perspectives. The progress of the universe, and in particular of the human universe, does not take place in competition with God, nor does it squander energies that we rightly owe to him. The greater man becomes, the more humanity becomes united with consciousness of and master of its potentialities, the more beautiful creation will be, the more perfect adoration will become, and the more Christ will find for the mystical intentions a body worthy of resurrection. The world can no more have two summits than a circumference can have two centers. The star for which the world is waiting, without yet being able to give it a name, or rightly appreciate its true transcendence, or even recognize the most spiritual and divine of its rays, is necessarily Christ himself, in whom we hope, to desire the Parousia. And all we have to do is let the very heart of the earth, as we Christianize it, beat within us. See what I mean? I really like everything he's saying except for some things. Men of little faith, why do you fear or repudiate the progress of the world? Why foolishly multiply your warnings and your prohibitions? Quote, don't venture, don't try, everything is known, the earth is empty and old, there is nothing more to be discovered, end quote. Oh my God. We must try everything for Christ. We must hope everything for Christ. Nihil intentatum. Nihil intentatum, meaning nothing unattempted. It's not like from the Bible as far as I can see. I don't know where. It's from I think Plato used the phrase, or it got translated into Latin. And as a side note, it is the heraldic motto of the HMS Endeavour of the United Kingdom's Royal Navy. Thank you, editor. That, on the contrary, is the true Christian attitude. To divinize does not mean to destroy, but to surcreate. We shall never know all that the incarnation still expects of the world's potentialities. We shall never put enough hope in the growing unity of mankind. Jerusalem, lift up your head. Look at the immense crowds of those who build and those who seek. All over the world, men are toiling in laboratories, in studios, in deserts, in factories, in the vast social crucible. The ferment that is taking place by their instrumentality in art and science and thought is happening for your sake. Open then your arms and your hearts like Christ your Lord, and welcome the waters, the flood, and the sap of humanity. Accept it, this sap, for without its baptism you will wither, without desire, like a flower out of water, and tend it, since without your sun it will disperse itself wildly in sterile shoots. The other branches of Abrahamic religion, I think, is what he's referring to. Like I said, 95% of everything he says is like awesome. And then there's that 5%. It's like, certain people I can't recommend this to, but it's damn good. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right. The temptations of too large a world, the seductions of too beautiful a world, where are these now? They do not exist, Devo.
It's a beautiful world for you. It's a beautiful world, not me. It's a beautiful world.
Thank you, Devo. Okay. Now the earth can certainly clasp me in her arms again. She can swell me with her life. Or take me back into her dust. She can deck herself out for me with every chasm. Charm. Deck herself out with every charm. I was thinking the earth has chasms, but never mind, I'll just keep reading. With every horror, with every mystery. Seems a little sadomasochistic. Never mind. She can intoxicate me with her perfume of tangibility and unity. She can cast me to my knees in expectation of what is maturing in her breast. 3 dots. But her enchantments can no longer do me harm, since she has become for me, over and above herself, the body of him who is and of who is coming. The divine milieu. French editor's note. In March 1955, the last month of his life, Père Teilhard de Chardin's thoughts went back to le milieu divin, and he wrote at the beginning of a final profession of faith. It is a long time now since La Messe sur le Monde and Le Milieu Divin. I tried to put in the words the admiration and wonder I felt as I confronted perspectives as yet hardly formulated within me. Today, after 40 years of constant reflection, it is still exactly the same fundamental vision which I feel the need to set forth and to share in its mature form for the last time, with less exuberance and freshness of expression, perhaps, than at my first encounter with it, but still with the same wonder and the same passion. It's the end of Teilhard de Chardin, 40 years after the voice of Teilhard de Chardin that we've been hearing for the past 27 episodes. No work of this great believer can be understood except in relation to this, quote, fundamental vision, end quote, of Le Milieu Divin. I'm glad we read it. The vision, parentheses, always implicit even when not stated, end parentheses, of Christ as all in everything, of the universe moved and compenetrated, new word, C-O-M-penetrated. Compenetrated, meaning to penetrate throughout or pervade. If you learned something today, like and subscribe, all that. By God in the totality of its evolution. He ended the book on the word evolution. We finished the divine milieu today. Can you believe it? If you've seen all 27 episodes, you have officially read this book. Kind of, you know what I mean. Okay, so one thing that's going to be fun, Editor Edward is going to help speed this up because I am going to grab every Teilhard de Chardin book I can find in there and then roll some dice. Belay that, you might have noticed by my whatever this is, and glasses, that I have the ultimate authority around here, more than the guys, either of them, sitting in front of the bookshelf. Hi, I'm Editor Edward. You should know me by now. Anyway, I didn't realize, because it says Teilhard commented 40 years later, after 40 years after writing this. He died in 1955, which implies that the Divine Milieu must have been written in 1915 or earlier. I did a bit of Googling, digging around on Wikipedia and such, and learned that it had been banned within the Jesuit Church, and it was published, I think, a couple years after he died. So that's interesting. Unfortunately, while I was digging, I learned for the very first time, I did not know this until about less than half an hour ago, that later in life, he was a strong advocate for eugenics. Which is kind of devastating to me in a little bit, because that means I'm not going to read Teilhard de Chardin anymore, ultimately. I mean, I could. I went back and forth about it. When I started the shower that I just finished, my hair is still wet, I was not going to read any more Teilhard de Chardin. By the end of the shower, I decided, you know what, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to keep reading Teilhard de Chardin. And then I went in and talked to Priel about it. And she was like, yeah, keep reading it. And I was like, because what I was thinking I might do is stop reading Teilhard de Chardin, because I think we've got the gist of his thing, and introduce a brand new book to Chicken Philosophy. It's a rather thick book, so we'll be reading it for a while. The Nag Hammadi scriptures. So, for those who don't know, back in the old days, when people were passing around these transcribed copies of the original 30 some odd, 50 some odd, however many gospels there were 4 that were particularly popular. Now there's 2 sides of the story. The folks that are into this will usually say something to the effect of, the powers that be knew that by selecting these 4 and maybe editing them a little, they could maintain power and justify their existence as the corporatization in Constantinople and or Rome of Jesus, you know. That's what these folks would usually probably say. The other side, Teilhard de Chardin's response, would be something along the lines of that these were the 4 that were, I mean, he'd probably say the Holy Spirit came through the writers of these 4 and not through the, I mean, you know, just sort of like disregard entirely, like, yeah. But long story short, there were some that were selected, and the rest of them were kind of banned, at least in the areas where they had control. But someone managed to sneak a copy of them into some like jars, and they put them in this cave that had just the right combination of salt water in the air or something. The heat, it was in Egypt. And someone found them in like the 1940s, and they were like, holy crap. And they, you know, checked them, and they're like, yeah, these are legit. All the other gospels. So they got to translating them. When they were done translating them into English, it got published so that we could read the forbidden gospels, or, you know, the gospels that didn't make it into the Bible. A lot of them are like way different from the 4 canonized gospels. I mean, most of them are, but they have some overlap. And, you know, there's some controversial elements as well. It's not like we're going to be like, this is the truth, you know, like we're going to explore this, you know, here. That's going to be my perspective anyway, and the other 4, however many Edwards there are. Anyway, so yeah, this is the big announcement. The guy at the in front of the bookshelf was under the impression that he was going to make you guys vote for which of the 2 books he had in his hands of Teilhard de Chardin to read next. But I've made this executive decision. This is official Chicken Philosophy, you know, canon, that we're done with the Pierre Teilhard de Chardin for now. We might come back to it, but I doubt it. But this is, yeah, the next time you see purple, it's going to be BT and and the purple, it's not going to be BT reads Teilhard de Chardin, it's going to be BT begins the new Nag Hammadi segment on, or series or whatever, on chicken philosophy.